Oh, communication. Sometimes it just gets really complicated. And I've got like three things about my situation here that just make it a little bit more of a challenge for people to communicate with me. Now, you might have heard the term mansplaining. Well, there are other kinds of splaining to go along with that. And my situation here is that I'm a foreigner. And I know that sometimes when people look at me, they get this expression on their face like, can I talk to her? Will she understand me? And so a lot of times people ask me where I'm from, and I'll tell them, but then they won't know if I speak Spanish. And I like it when they just ask. But sometimes they'll ask in kind of a negative way, but most of the time they'll ask, do you speak Spanish? I'll try to answer them in a way that shows that, yes, I speak Spanish quite well, actually. And so that opens up the conversation a little bit. But it's not the only thing that happens about being a foreigner, because I find that when I'm talking to people about situations and things that they will explain to me, well, you know the culture here, and this is how people are, and they'll start explaining to me how people respond to things in the culture. Now, a lot of these cases, I've actually been in this country a lot longer than they've been alive, because I've been here for 28 years now. And so I try to be nice about it. I try to be kind and listen to what they have to say, but explain to them that, yes, I do understand the culture here, and that's really not a problem. But that's not the only kind of splaining that I deal with here. Sometimes I do need to deal a little bit with the mansplaining also. Here it's a little different though, because this culture here is quite machista. And if you haven't been in a culture like that, it really does affect the communication between men and women. Now, a lot of this is because men do have a much different world here. There are things that are expected that men do this, women do that. The roles here are a lot more divided than they are in a lot of other cultures. And so sometimes it's just that women don't have the opportunity to learn about things in certain areas because that's just the things that guys do. And women that try to do those things are very unusual. Or maybe they're just not interested in that type of things. And so women just keep to their own areas. But I have had to kind of face some situations with that, especially with things like auto mechanics, for example. Now, I like cars. I'm not an auto mechanic, but I do understand some things about engines, and I really enjoyed looking at my engine when I was a teenager, a young adult, and I had a 67 Mustang, and I took that thing apart and put it together. Had a lot of fun with that, replacing parts and things. When I was a teenager, I got myself this model to put together that was called the Visible V8, and I was always looking into things and learning about engines and how they work. So I understand a little bit about car engines, and that here is very unusual for a woman to know anything, even how to change a tire. But so when I go to a mechanic, if I don't know them very well, then I find that they just kind of explain things barely, or maybe not even explain things at all. And so I'll try to ask a couple questions because I like to understand what's going on with my car, and I like for a mechanic to feel free that he can talk to me about stuff. And so I will kind of dig in a little bit. And it's really neat to see how sometimes they'll just brighten up and say, oh, this lady understands about cars. And when that happens, then we can really talk about things. And sometimes I think that's actually saved me from being cheated because they know that I understand what they're talking about. So anyway, I do have a good mechanic. He's an electromechanic and helps me with a lot of the other stuff on my car too. And he knows me and we get along, and there's just a lot of mutual respect there. So I just found that sometimes in these situations, when people think that they have to explain things to you in an adjusted way or in a different way, it's just better to go along with it, to be nice, to be kind and personable, because to be negative about it just doesn't help in the relationship at all. But another area where communication kind of gets changed around a little bit is because of age. And you may have heard of age-splaining. Now, I looked up the term, And it seems that there are two different ways that age-splaining is used. One that's not quite so common, I think, is that when somebody's older and they think they know everything, and so they're explaining it to somebody younger, that just assuming that they don't know, right? But I think the way that it's more commonly used is when people assume that an older person doesn't understand something just because they're older. And they start explaining it to them in sometimes a condescending way, sometimes it's being polite, sometimes just trying to find out where somebody stands. When it's condescending, that does get kind of annoying. It's like, I might have gray hair, but my brain is still all here, okay? And I can understand what you're saying. And one area that I've really found this is when it has to do with tech. Now, I love technology. I stay up to date with a lot of things that go on. I like to learn new things. I like to learn things that make things easier. And I like media. So there's some things that I do know about technology that I've kept up with. Now, when it comes to social media, I just really don't like Facebook and Instagram and all of that. I'm not on X. But if I need to do something with all of that, I let my daughter take care of it. But I do like technology. I like applications. I like to do video editing and work with audio and dubbing and AI voices, just the whole thing. So I do understand how to use my phone, how to use my computer, just how to do these things. And when somebody tries to explain something to me about technology, that they're just assuming that I'm not going to understand something, even if it's just how my phone works, then that can be a little bit annoying. But in all of these things, really, what it comes down to is just the attitude. It just comes down to whether somebody's being condescending or whether they are actually trying to help you because you might not understand something. And I think the best thing is just to somehow diagnose whether a person is really understanding or not, and just don't assume that they do or that they don't. And then take it from there, whether it's the language you speak or the culture that you're dealing with, or whether it's something that has to do with age. I think it's best just to find out what somebody might know. And if we're on the end of receiving the explanation for stuff, to be kind and be patient and try to show that we do get it and that we can communicate about these things, because it's important how we treat people. That person that you're talking to might be a stranger at the moment, but they might not always end up being a stranger, so it's best to establish those relationships the best you can. So I don't know what kind of situations you might have come in contact with. I'd love to hear something about your experience. Let me know in the comments. And so thanks for spending a little while with me in this video. And I hope I can catch you in the next one.